Hello, Kayakus here, and welcome to another Mendacium demo. Mendacium is a Jurassic Metroidvania where you adapt and evolve to slay tribal reptiles, dinosaurs and lizards. Although last year was quite criminal for me when it comes to having time for the actual game development, I'm happy to say that I managed to do some crucial things that I wanted to do for a really long time. Making everything connect thematically, as well as upgrading art and feel of the game. At the beginning of last year, I released a demo on Steam Next Fest, and I was quite happy with the results. I got around 4,000 wishlists just from that, and people who played it seemed to kinda enjoy the game overall, which is a good sign. However, after that, it was time to do something that I wanted to do for a really long time and fix an issue about focus on the actual thematic of the game. Due to many iterations and me learning how to draw, the visual of the game is a complete mess. The overall UI is kinda random, the zones are fine, but assets are old and there is overall lack of vibe, if you really want to call it like that. Last time I tried to fix this by using a make it a reptile philosophy. This save point stone over here, make it a reptile. Make an altar to be a stone reptile. This flying blob, a flying reptile. This passive one, baby reptile. Which helped a bit, however I feel like I focused too much on turning stuff into reptiles that I completely forgot the prehistoric part of the theme and the overall environment. Lizards are nice, but dinosaurs are a vibe. Think Jurassic Park, untamed nature, giant creatures. Now we go full Jurassic mode. And what a better way to do that than to redo all of the art in the game. I already wanted to redraw all of the art assets for some time, since every asset is drawn in a slightly different way. I think I drew so many rocks and grass up until this point that I feel confident enough that I can draw everything in somewhat coherent art style. Before, the main thing that most assets shared was this textured brush, which I used to hide the fact that I'm not really that good at shading, so this gave it some easy texture. But it always made the assets look noisy. So after experimenting, the new style is more stylized with harsher blending. It makes it easier for me to shade in general, and it also looks much crispier. This was also an opportunity to fix these super blocky main layer assets, so after drawing a bunch of rocks, ground and grass, some bones here and there, we have something that looks like this. The background was also one of the issues in the previous version, since it had an actual horizon line. It made it look weird when you're trying to go upwards in the room. Now it's not as apparent, plus it feels more Jurassic with these huge cliffs and open space. And with that, I went through every room and redid the art completely, including the village, destroyed village, as well as caves and other areas. The standout for me being the intro area. With all new art, I also redid the mining ores, but most importantly added cuttable grass, which was missing from the old version. Currency is not scales anymore, because first, it should be something kinda rare and not just something that every reptile has on their skin. And second, dinosaurs don't really have scales as far as I know. Now we have iridium, a rare material found mostly in meteorites. It's something that came from space and you know, dinosaurs, meteor, thematic. Environment done, now moving to the UI. The in-game UI always felt a bit lame, so now it looks like this. Health bar was also changed from a point system to a normal number system, meaning you don't have like 5 health, but more like 500. The bars are there to indicate every 100 health. The health numbers also allow me to experiment more with damage taken, since with only 5 health, for example, you can't really lose half a health. Nothing major, but it just helps with scaling of the game. With the UI in general, I went with more tribal aesthetics. Before it was kinda sci-fi, but not really. Now inventory looks much cleaner. The crafting UI is more understandable. Before it was hard to see what you can actually make, like all of the recipes that you have and so on. Now you just have the actual list there. The loadouts changed a lot. Instead of having some random rune circle and runes, now we have totems and a necklace. Still the same system with 3 different colors, weight, colored slots and necklace bonus, just with much more flavor. And all of the other panels got updated as well, which is less exciting, but yeah, had to be done, like quest, shop, crafting, and the dialogue. Next up we have the enemies. Basic patrol enemy. He looked more like an armadillo before, or just some kind of bug. Now he's a fat snail lizard. I felt weird that from all of the stuff that I can showcase in the demo, I have 1 enemy, 1 main boss and 2 rares that are basically same form of these magical stone elementals. So now stone sentinels are fossils. Not much to say there, better fits the theme and doesn't involve some magical floating stones. The stone sentinel boss is now also a fossil, but with much cooler sword. The punchy guy was deleted completely and I made a completely new boss as a replacement. This strong dinosaur that punches rocks. The corrupted sentinel was also deleted and replaced with completely new boss, this shadow cultist lizard. The pink lizard is much bigger than before and now he can actually bite as well. Killing an enemy when you're low on life has a chance to drop edible remains that you can consume and get the blood needed to heal or just straight up heal. While the reworking art, I also managed to combine that with some of the fixes regarding the demo feedback that I got. The main issue was that the player character felt a bit slow and heavy and that he was buggy and wobbly. At first I didn't quite understand the issue, but after checking the animations I could not unsee it anymore. It was some weird interaction with the stretching, mostly a way I was animating before. However, this is a perfect time to rework the character model entirely as well. It was a good base before, but he could not open his mouth and he looked kinda cute but not the smartest. Also, he was still kinda going in the plushy territory. New model personally looks cooler, more menacing and more like an actual dangerous reptile/raptor dinosaur, but still somewhat cute. With that I redid all of the animations and now there is no wobble anymore. He runs more like a raptor, which is more on the theme as well, and is much more fluid compared to the old one that looks so rigid now when compared side by side. While here, I also revisited the player movement script, since I can tell you that was a mess for sure. The move and jump speeds are faster, jump is more precise, and just overall movement feels much better. I also added a ledge grab so that platforming is even smoother, and now you can even interrupt the slide with the jump to perform a diagonal jump, which also adds more depth to the movement overall. While being fired up about the animations, I also reworked the visuals for the hookshot, double jump, air dash, all being more organic and bony. Not sure how much you can tell by just looking and not playing it, but I hope improvements in fluidity are somewhat visible. If you learned anything from my previous devlogs, you know that when I talk about the character, I have to rework the combat system to some extent. This time it will be a final time, I promise. Before, you had a spear and hitting 4 times switched you to a magical bow. Shooting all arrows switched you back to the spear. So basically a 2-weapon cycle that just happens while you are hitting enemies normally. I personally like the mechanic from an idea perspective, as you end up using 2 weapons while just spamming 1 attack button. However, most people just found it weird.
Your character automatically switches between using a spear and a magical bow and arrow during combat, which is a little weird.
I don't have a bow. Oh, but now I think I have a bow. No, I don't have a bow. Oh, wait. I am so confused.
So we're going to automatically switch. Right, my immediate question is, why?
But most importantly, it didn't make much sense. Also, magical sci-fi bow? Sure, but not the cleanest thing to grasp. So, new and hopefully final version. Scrap the magical bow. That was easy, but it makes sense. The spear is a nice weapon and it's much easier to understand from the start of the game. I watched many gameplay videos of the demo and people were super confused as this switching of weapons and so on is literally the first thing that you encounter. So just the spear, we are keeping it simple. There is also a 4-hit combo that is not necessarily I click a button fast and he does the combo type of thing, but more like stacking hits, and the 4th hit is stronger. This lasts for several seconds, so you can kinda stack it up and use the final attack in the combination with other things like a hook shot, for example. However, you can also just ignore it and you will be fine, it will happen naturally. That's my new motto when it comes to combat. I want to add as much depth as possible and little things that the players can optimize to deal more damage or do more things, but still make it so that you can just kinda go around mindlessly and slap if you really want to. But I can't just remove the bow and call it a day. Magical bow might be deleted, but the regular bow can come back as a new weapon. And not just the bow, but we have another new weapon called daggers. New system allows you to unlock weapons and switch between them as part of your loadouts. We have spear, which is an overall good weapon, solid damage, solid range. You start the game with it, it's mega nice. Bow is a high range, slow attack speed and kinda deals nothing if you are up close and you have less health while having the bow equipped. But you can damage enemies from safe distance, which is kinda broken. Daggers are low range weapon with faster attack speed that just slap and deal more damage than the rest. Also, every second attack hits twice, which can be combined with on-hit effects. However, due to its low range, you will probably get hit more often, so you have a bit more health while playing with daggers. Different weapons will also synergize with different passive effects and abilities that you can equip. Kinda hard to imagine without playing it, but I also want to leave some stuff for you to experience in the actual game and not just reveal everything in these devlogs. However, just so you know, I'm obsessed with builds and effects, synergy and different playstyles, so expect a lot of different builds and stuff that you can do. While we are at the topic of combat, I was playing around in the game and I realized that it needs something more. Most Metroidvania games that I saw are not necessarily the same, but kind of feel the same to me. I think it's because of minute-to-minute gameplay. And in game like this is basically running, jumping and hitting enemies. So I decided to focus on that since that's what you will be doing most of the game anyway. And I feel like the solution for this is the variety of combat, considering of course that we are talking about combat games and not platformers. Usually most games just solve this issue with making different enemy types that force you to defeat them in slightly different ways. For example, a shield enemy that forces you to find an opening to strike, or a flying enemy that requires jumping. This kinda does the job, but doesn't really solve the actual combat issue. It just puts you in different situations. Think about it like this. If you slay 10 exactly the same enemies in a row, how different will that combat feel? Abilities help here as well. It basically comes down to how many optional combat decisions you can make at one point in time. A recent game, 9 Souls, spices up combat by adding parrying mechanic, which changes how fighting feels entirely. Upcoming game Crossworn has a gun and a melee weapon, and Silksong seemingly has random tools, diagonal jump attack, crests that alter your basic attacks and so on. I know Silksong is super stacked, we will see. I know 2 of these examples are not even released yet, and this is judging only based on what I've seen in promotional material, but they are still great examples. This is really a simplified explanation. Combos, attack, options like pogoing, and environmental interactions just multiply all of these options, as well as of course the enemy variety and types that just multiplies literally everything here. So, my additions were 2 systems that I feel will spice up the gameplay. Weak points and adaptations. While in combat with the enemy, the tesseract that you are carrying with you will analyze enemies and show their weak points. If you hit the enemy from that angle, you deal huge damage. Simple enough. However, I can set a certain amount of unique weak points per enemy and also play around with their positions and which ones would be spicy for that enemy type, depending on their attacks. For example, this enemy can jump on you, so he can actually have a weak point at his belly. While he is just walking around, you might think, what am I supposed to do here? But you can actually hit him while he's jumping. The weak points are also randomized, of course, from the ones that I decided would make most sense for a specific enemy. So sometimes you will need to pogo the enemy, slide through and hit from the back, or wait for the enemy attack and get an opening. Really happy with this system. It's like a mini combat puzzle, not necessarily needed to kill an enemy, but you will kill the enemy much faster. Second system is adaptations. In the world, you will sometimes get this icon that indicates an adaptation spot. Hold an interaction button and you will adapt, making your next basic attacks do something different and more powerful. For some, it's only one attack, and for others can be a couple, so I am open to experiment with different effects. The player model also changes a bit, which adds some flavor. These effects deal more damage than any of your abilities or basic attacks, but are balanced around the fact that they are consumable and not always there. Think about it as a single-use abilities that you can pick up while just going around. You can adapt before the fight to get an early advantage, or do it mid-fight to extend your attacks. Some adaptations can even lead to actual abilities, like adapting to fire gives you a recipe for an ability to breathe fire. Huge fan of how this turned out, and I can't wait to go crazy with all of the effects in the future. Now, all of the combat effects and abilities would not be complete without debuff and status effects. I also added a way to apply different debuffs to enemies, being burn for X amount of seconds, or poison, or even debuffs that increase damage taken, and so on. On top of that, I can also apply status effects to enemies like slow, stun, root, and freeze. Good example is this new ability that can catch an enemy and root them in place, which also cancels their movement attacks like dashes and jumps. However, this only works on simple enemies and not bosses. Another new ability, as an example, is a freezing trap that can freeze the first enemy that steps on it. However, on first damage taken, the freeze breaks and deals bonus frost damage. So you can combo this with attack that is harder to hit while the enemy is moving. With all of this, I quickly realized that there also needs to be a nice way to manage all of the numbers, because having an overview of everything that is happening can go completely out of hand really fast. Like an ability that has direct damage plus an area of effect explosion, plus it applies a debuff like burn or something like that over X amount of seconds. That's already 3 different numbers, and these should also scale depending on player's level, plus all of the percentage bonuses from all of the passive effects that you have. However, before, each of these objects handled its own damage numbers, which works, but it's super messy. Now I have one scriptable object per attack or ability that holds all of the numbers and scaling, and passes them to the corresponding components. Much easier to have an overview of each ability and how much damage is actually done. Last but not least, on the side I also did some promotional stuff like this thumbnail, which took much longer than I thought since I never drew a splash art in my life, but it actually turned out great. I am happy. Last time I talked about the direction of the game, how I still see this as a prototype, and how I feel like I might be on the right path. Well, now I actually think that this is the path. This is the game. The whole point of all of this reworking was to elevate everything that was already there, get the art up to the level that I wanted, polish the gameplay, combat and player character, while simultaneously connecting everything under the prehistoric thematic. And I think I did a okay job with that. As you might have noticed, now there is a huge difference between everything that I've shown in this video and the actual demo that you can play. So I decided to disable the current demo for time being, as it doesn't really reflect what the game is anymore. Of course, until I update it with all of the new stuff, hopefully soon. Then you will be able to try all of the new things. Till then, let me know in the comments what you think about the changes and where the game is headed. Lastly, I want to give some info on where the game is currently. I'm still working on this on the side while having a 40-hour job, as well as, well, handling life. And judging by my lack of activity last year, one might say that finding free time is kinda rough. What I'm trying to do is make sure that the core game is really on point, all of the systems are implemented, work well together and make sense, and that I figured out the workflows that are efficient and actually produce good results. Main examples being creation of enemies and bosses, as well as drawing assets. And all of this on a smaller scale so that it's easier to make big decisions if necessary. To the point where the only thing left is to just make more content. Being more rooms, enemies, bosses and so on. Only when I'm confident enough with all of this, I feel like I'm allowed to ask for funds on Kickstarter or something similar and sit down full time and just make this thing. Otherwise, I simply don't think it's possible with the free time I currently have available. And if I really ask for funds, I will not try to sell you a concept that just sounds cool or something that should work in theory, but something that I've spent a lot of time perfecting and I truly believe it is amazing. And for now, I can just tell you that I'm actually pretty close. But that's it for now. I'm done, and until next time.